what I was training on last week was just kind of like understanding how to implement the different steps in financial independence. So these are just concepts and tools. I remember I used the analogy of the tools in your tool belt that you should be able to have a conversation with and explain and help a client with. So again, while we're waiting for everybody to kind of get their people on, let's just kind of reiterate or just go over again the here we go. What we talked about last week. Okay. So we talked about things like here, Neil, I can't write. I don't know why I can't write. Well, that's really weird. It's not letting me write on here. Oh, here we go. Okay. We talked about how ways that we can help them increase cash flow and how to help them if they are tight on cash flow, how to help them to create their own budget. And then, of course, worst case scenario, they don't have any money, recruit them, right? They should be doing that anyways. We talked about the emergency fund, where to put it, that it should be 3 to 6 months worth of income, that it doesn't need to be in really high returns. It just needs to be liquid. But we talked about a couple places to put it. And we also talked about how if they were maybe, self-employed with a very up and down type pay or commission only, and they have a lot of debt or mortgage or a bunch of kids or a house or whatever, that they have inconsistent pay, that they want to definitely be on the high end of at least 6 months. And so again, every client could be different when it comes to that as well. And then of course, we talked a lot about the debt management, debt snowballing, debt avalanching, and how do you gather the information for that, having the client maybe try to find out if there's options with some of their debt to get lower interest rates, or possibly move some of the higher interest rates down to lower interest rate cards, and then either paying with the amount that they're allocating towards debt, either paying a lot of minimum payments on everything, and then the balance of that money going towards either the one smallest debt to get the one debt paid off, that's debt snowballing, or going towards the highest interest rate, which I typically prefer to do because it pays it off faster. Sean said he prefers the other snowballing, usually because a lot of people just aren't disciplined and they like those little wins. That's a psychological thing. So either way, it's a plan to get out of debt. Okay. And we also talked about protection, and we talked about how to explain term versus permanent to a client, how to explain how whole life versus other flexible policies work, like UL and IUL and possibly VUL. And then we also talked about the DIME method. And the DIME method was, debt, income, mortgage, and education. And so trying to figure out if the breadwinner were to die or this individual was to die, what's the need? What's the face amount need? What's the insurable need? And so paying off the debt is typically a need. Replacing the income that person's bringing into the home to pay all those bills is a need. Mortgage repayment is usually something people want to look at. And then if education, paying their kids' education is very important, you want to probably add a little term policy in for that, and drop it off when they're 18. As far as the income replacement, again, it depends on their goals and their needs. 10 times their income, let's say they make 80,000, 10 times would be 800,000 face amount, would replace income for that wife that possibly doesn't work, where she can live off the interest. And then of course paying everything else. But if you're doing a lot of higher end of the income replacement, then they possibly might not want the mortgage paid because it's going to be paid with the income. Again, these are conversations that you have with your client. So we talked about all of those things. And again, it's once you know this stuff, you know this stuff. Doesn't have to be scripted. It's conversational with your client. And the thing is, you're not going to go over all of these things typically with every client. You're going to go over what's needed with that individual. Okay. And now let's get into these last two today. So the next one is building wealth. And of course, the two biggest pieces of that is, getting the higher returns. It says strive to outpace inflation, get the higher returns, and reduce taxes. So let's see, I'm going to take this off now. Okay. All right, so retirement planning or long-term savings doesn't have to necessarily be retirement. It could be they're saving for their kids' education or whatever, but we're mostly talking about retirement here. For long-term savings, we need to have long-term thinking. Okay, so these are conversations to have with your client a lot of times too, that this part, this money, right? Because we're going to take whatever there is on their F&A, and some of it might go towards short-term debt, emergency fund, insurance. Some might go towards midterm, maybe buying that home or buying that rental property. And then the last one is long-term savings. So when you're having these conversations, you know, you want to make sure that they have long-term thinking, that this one's for you're putting the money in, taking it out as you need it for emergency. But this one is set up so that we're not taking it out, right? For whatever you're putting here, you're learning to be disciplined, first to be a saver and pay yourself first, and then to be an investor, right? And start to build wealth. And so these are conversations that I typically have. Let's say I'm sitting with my client and they're like, well, I need to start saving, but they're not saving anything right now. Okay. Let's say they even have $2,000 discretionary income. But they don't save any of it. You know, are we going to take that whole $2,000 and put it into long term and lock it up? Probably not. Okay. Probably not. We need to start building some good habits. Now, I want to make sure that emergency fund is funded and the debt is repaid with whatever I'm going to allocate towards short term. But I am going to also carve out a bit towards their long term. Now, a lot of you guys will do an F&A and figure out their FIN number. And let's say their FIN number says they need to save $1,200 a month, but they only have $500 to save. Do you say, well, I guess you're never going to get there. I guess you're going to have to just be poor. No. So the conversation looks like this. Like, look, I'm really happy and excited for you that you're getting started. And that's the first step. Now, to be able to meet your goal of being able to retire at 65 and not have to work at Walmart or go back to work, you need to save $1,200 a month, you know, if it's in this type of tax environment. So a couple things is going to have to happen. Either you'll have to push out your retirement date to have that same lifestyle. It won't be at 65, it'll be later, or you'll have to lower what you're asking for in retirement income. Like instead of making 80,000, you'll have to make less. Does that make sense? So, but the main thing is that we get started now. We can catch up and hopefully you can make more money. But the most important thing is you start saving. Okay. And so you're having these, conversations, but then you're definitely in the entire time when you're doing step 5, you're making sure that they understand that whatever that carve out is for the long-term money, whether let's say you're putting $250 of it towards short-term and you're putting $250 of it towards long-term, that long-term is now, to become an investor, first you have to become a saver. You have to learn to pay yourself first. Okay. And so this is something that where you're going to put it away. Now, if let's say you're doing an IUL, the nice thing about the IUL is you don't have to wait till 59 and a half. There's no rules on it like your IRAs or your, qualified plans or those things. But even though you can access it sooner, I don't want you thinking of it that way. I want you thinking of you're putting it away. This is for long term. Okay. And so this, the number that we come up for this amount, I want you to be able to say, Jamie, yep, I can pay that. I can pay that every month. I can invest that every month. Okay. So I want that to be, of course, I know I can do that. I don't want you to have to be digging into this midway. Does that make sense? So the first thing is that thinking, that long-term thinking that's kind of embedded in your conversations with your client. Okay. Now let's talk about those two things, outpacing inflation and reducing taxes. Okay. So if you guys have questions along the way, throw them in the chat and Christina can interrupt me, kind of like how we did last week. Okay. But I want to show you the long-term. Okay. Let's see if I can pull up my whiteboard. All right. So for the long-term savings, we were talking about higher returns. Okay. and outpacing inflation. This is just a concept. Again, I do not go over this every time with the client, but sometimes it will come up because, you know, it just depends on their level of understanding. But I'll talk about what inflation is. And I'll ask them, what do you think the inflation rate is? And they'll be like, I don't know, like 3%. I'm like, okay, well, let's say the government said it was 3%. It's obviously much higher right now. But let's say the inflation rate that the government says is 3%. Do you know how they calculate inflation? No, I don't think anybody, Sean, has anybody ever told you, yes, they know how that works? Inflation, how it's,
Inflation?
yeah, no, most people, they don't know. So I said, well, they calculate the cost of goods. But when they're calculating this rate of US inflation, they're calculating a lot of things in there. Like, for example, the price of a truckload of asphalt. Mr. and Mrs. Client, when's the last time you bought a truckload of asphalt? Right? So, but that's calculated in the inflation rate that they're projecting for you. So, but if you calculated things that you're spending money on, like the rising cost of college education or groceries, right? Those types of things, it's way higher than they're even telling us it is. Does that make sense? But let's say it's 3. And let's say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, that you were able to go down to the bank and get a 3% CD, like a 3% guaranteed CD. Okay, so if inflation is 3 and you're earning 3, how much are you actually earning on your money? And then they say 0%. I'm like, but actually it's less than 0. It's less than 0 because actually you have to pay taxes on the 3% gain. So you're actually in the negatives. Does that make sense? And so it's just I'm just giving you this because it gives you a very simple explanation of how to explain how inflation works. Okay. So it looks like someone asked a question. Can you speak a little on the process of helping them figure out their fin? Oh, okay, good. Actually, I think that's a good one for Sean. Sean, you want to do that? So a lot of you guys will use the FNA, the financial needs analysis. And I get this question a lot. Like, I use a financial needs analysis? I will tell you, I use the FNA every single time I do a client appointment. Now, do I use the computer and put it in every single time? Not every time, not every time. But do I actually take an FNA? Yes, a paper FNA. Now, there's questions on, like there's some people that use a financial needs analysis that's on the computer and it comes up like you're on the Zoom with your client and it's like a computerized version that the client can see. Now, if you or your SMD do that, I'm not going to bash it. I'll just tell you, I won't do that. Okay. Here's why, because there's a lot of questions on that FNA. And I am kind of I'm smart enough now, and I've done this long enough that I know which questions I already know, or I don't need to know, I don't need to put onto this. So I don't want the client looking at those questions, first of all, seeing how many things that they have to go through here and thinking, how long is this going to take? Maybe I need to reschedule to do this another time. So I don't like the FNA being up there, but I also, if I'm skipping around, because I do skip around and I go back and forth on page 1 and page 2 of the FNA and write stuff and take my own notes on things, or I write little homework things on it, then I don't want the client like getting confused with any of that. So what I do, where did my FNAs go? Sean, can you hand me one of my FNAs? There's one right in front of you. Right in front of you. Okay. So I'm going to cover her name. This is one of my new directs. Okay. So this is an FNA that I took this week. All right. So do you see how, like, I know what this means? Okay. So if I was doing it in front of the client, I probably would be much more neat and detailed and slow, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so let's see. For the debt stuff, how I got the card number 1, Amex card, JCPenney card, whatever, interest rates, how much she pays, right? So all the insurance information. So I do it like this. So the answer is yes, I take one every time. Does it go into the computer and spit out a thing 100% of the time? No, I would say Sean probably does it more often than I do. But if you do that, or if you want to put it into the computer or your staff puts it into the computer, make sure they're well trained so that's accurate information. If your staff does input it for you or the trainee does input it for you, make sure you go in before you present anything to a client and make sure it's correct. But it will spit out an FN number for you. Meaning it'll say, here's how much you need to have, how many dollars you'll need to have at age 65, whatever their goal is. Like on this page of the FNA, right? It will typically ask, what age do you want to retire? How much income do you need to make? And so that goes into the computer. So it says at age 65 to have $80,000 a year in today's dollars with inflation, you need to save $2,000 a month if it's taxable, you know, $1,300 a month if it's tax-free or whatever. Okay. But the number, it gives you a FIN number. It gives you, here's how much you need to save. And let's say that number is ridiculous because they don't have anything saved. I would still give them that number, but say, well, instead of retiring at 65, if you retired at 67, you only have to save this much. Or instead of having 80,000, if you had 76,000, here's how much you would have to save. Does that make sense? So you can do that. But Sean, will you go over?
Yeah.
Just like, here's
a quick.
Yes, the quick way.
Calculator.
Yeah. So I'll do this a lot with a client. And Sean's really good at it. It's really simple.
Yeah.
So, okay, go ahead.
Can I take, who can come off mute?
Oh, yes. Neil, take someone off mute. Let's see.
Who do you want to come off mute?
Just
Who's on here?
whatever, anyone.
Maybe they can raise their hand.
Who can we see here?
How about her? Who's that?
Yeah. Or Jamie.
Jamie Batu? Yeah, that's Jamie.
I see her.
Jamie Cutie Pie. She's so cute.
Duh.
She's the cutest.
Why is it not letting me, like I can see
I'm
it.
trying to.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there she has.
All right. So Jamie, how much in today's dollars do you think you'd be comfortable with in retirement? So what would you want to take home every month income wise?
For me, probably, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably I'd say 8,000 a month.
8,000 a month. Okay.
Mhm.
So when people tell me 8,000 a month, in my head automatically, I go times 20. And the reason I go times 20 is because you want to factor, this is all off the top of my head, right? So you want to factor a 5% return off of whatever the amount, because we have accounts that will guarantee you 5% annual income for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like at this point, we have those kinds of products. So that's in my head. So if you tell me $8,000 a month, it's times 20 on that, right? So
So
in my head.
times 12 times 20. You mean?
Huh?
8,000 times 12 times 20?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's see, two. So 8,000 is 12.
8,000 times 12, meaning that's the annual income.
Yeah. That's going to generate 8,000. So 8,000 times 12. So 96 grand. So about no, that's not right. Why is that not right?
1.92?
Yeah. Times. No, it is right. Okay. So let's call it 2 million, right? So what that means is you got to have like $2 million put away, let's say. Right now, most people are like, I'm never going to have $2 million. Right. So the way you figure it out.
Does everybody understand why he did the times 20? Like, so they're trying to figure out a number that will spit off that kind of income at 5%. So 5%, right? So if you did it this way instead, 8,000 times 12, right? Divided by 0.05%, it's the same number. Does that make sense? Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands why you got that number.
Yeah. And it's not, all I'm trying to get is that number.
A number that will spit off at 5% a year interest, what she wants to make.
Yep. So in order for you to generate 8 grand a month, Jamie, you need to have about $2 million put away. Do you think you're ever going to have $2 million?
No, that's a
No,
big
never?
number. I'm talking as my previous self.
Okay, but if they said yes, now here's the thing though, if they say yes, then I don't want you to be like a deer in the headlights, right? So if you said yes, then I'd say, well, when do you think you're going to have your $2 million by?
Oh, I'm not really sure. I'd never really thought about it.
Right? Doing what you're doing right now, how long you think it'll take you?
I don't know. I'm an engineer, so I make good money, but I'm not even close to that.
All right. Jamie, if you were a real engineer, you'd have done these numbers already. Come on. I'm just kidding.
Funny.
So,
You're right.
okay, so then let's figure it out real quick here. What age would you want to do that by? Like, as far as retirement goes, what's your thought process age-wise?
Yeah, I want it to be, 50 ideally, but I'm okay with 60.
Okay. And how old are you now?
I'm 34.
Okay, 34. So by the time you're 60, let's say, so now that gives me 26 years, right? So what I do, then I have my financial calculator, and the one I use, it's easy to load. It's the Real Estate Master. Mine happens to be the Real Estate Master 3X.
I
Like
have the same one.
if you go in, like
Qualifier plus 3x.
yeah, qualifier plus 3x. Like when I go in the app, it looks like that. I don't know if you guys can see that. Ooh, not really.
Okay, let me take a picture of it.
So Jamie, I'll take a picture, but it looks like this. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I say, all right, Jamie, if you want to have $2 million, so you type in 2 million
Mhm.
and then you hit shift and the FV right here, where it says loan amount, above it is in green FV. So when you hit shift, that's going to mean future value. See how it says $2 million future value?
Yeah.
Okay, so for you to have $2 million and you've got 26 years, so 26-year term. So I hit term, that's how long you have until then. And let's say we put you in something earning a 10% return. So I put in 10 and then I hit the interest button, that button right there. All the buttons are all right next to each other. They're the ones right in a row. So 10% interest. And then now I'm going to hit the payment button. When I hit the payment button, so Jamie, for you to be able to do that, you'd have to start putting away about $1,300 a month.
Oh. Oh boy.
Right. So I don't know if you like that number or not, but whether you do or not, if you want to be able to retire by the time you're 60 with 8 grand a month, you're going to have to put away at least that. And by the way, we didn't factor taxes and inflation or any of that stuff either. Right. But just off the top of our head, I just wanted you to have an idea and a number, so what you're doing currently, whether you could do 1,300 or not, like, what do you think comfortably you could put away? You think you could do 1,300 or less than that, more than that?
I don't think I can do 1,300, but I can definitely I just got rid of my student loan, so I can probably do 1,000.
Okay, cool. Right. And then I would just continue the conversation. Does that make sense? So like if you want to on the spot do a quick FIN number, you can start there because the FIN number, yeah, they want to have that. Yeah, it's one of the most powerful things we give people, but on the spot, like if you don't have an F&A to put in, and also sometimes let's say you're an elite right now, there's a lot of people scrambling, they're trying to do appointments fast. The F&A thing was down the other day.
Yeah,
like it
I
had
know.
crashed, right? And so people couldn't enter it. So if you can't do that, you just do a quick thing like this. And you say, hey, this is without taxes and inflation, you got to do about $1,350 a month. You can't do that, but $1,000. Okay, if you could do 1,000, at least it's a start, right? And if we do 1,000, and then you can do a quick calculation. You say $1,000, same kind of thing. This is if they ask, right? Generally, I'm not giving them all this extra information, but if they ask, then you say 1,000 a month, right? So I do 1,000 payment, 26-year term, 10% interest, and then shift future value, right? So it's going to give you about 1.5 million. Okay, so at 1.5 million, Okay, now times 0.05 divided by 12. So you start the 1,000 a month, at least you're on track to about a $6,000 a month income.
Hmm,
Right.
okay.
So if we get you started with that, at least like worst case, you know, you're on track to that. And then as things change, your income increases, whatever else, you know, we can put more and more, but we're going to show you the best place to put that so that you pay less in taxes. You can get a good return. You don't have to worry about losing all those things we were talking about. But so that, I mean,
Sounds
however
good.
long that took, right? 5 minutes, 6 minutes, just to do, ask the questions, get to that number. What I also did was I got a commitment,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I love that. So there's a lot of questions in the chat, so I wanted to kind of address that. So one of the questions was, well, what if they have a pension and how does that play into it? So there's a lot of things that play into it. If they have any money saved, if they have a pension, if they already have a 401k, all of those affect the FIN number.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do with the computer, putting the FNA in to get that actual accurate FIN number.
And I want to say this to the, like, I know there's a bunch of you that are T's, that are technical, that are thinkers, that your head is wanting to blow off its shoulders right now because it's not factoring inflation and taxes and their pension and other accounts that they have. By the way, none of that matters in this conversation. The number one thing that matters when you're doing an FNA and even when you're explaining the financial concepts is getting a solid commitment from them to do something. Because if they don't commit to do something and you don't start something with them, no matter how perfect the numbers are that you show them, if they don't start something, you still failed that person.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So, okay. So he was asking about the question. Let me give you, someone was asking about what's the app again. So this is what the app looks like. I just took a picture and that's what the app actually looks like. Jasmine just texted me a picture. She's like, I have the big one on my desk.
Oh my God.
So you can actually just buy a calculator. I have a bunch of these around my
The
house.
pocket ones, not the big ones.
I don't
They
have
make those in a pocket version.
Yeah, I have a pocket version of these. I don't have the gigantic one.
We used to though.
Yeah, I used to have one of these. But but I love this calculator because it's so simple for trainees that are newly, new field trainers to use versus like some of the really complicated financial calculators. But you are now a financial advisor, financial planner, registered rep, whatever you are, and you should have it's one of your tools that you need. Okay, you should have a financial calculator. If you don't, yeah, I like it to have it on my phone as well. So I'll just show you. I have it on my phone too. Show you real quick. It's right here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So I just calculated hers. If she retired at 65 instead of 60, you only need $930 a month, Jamie, to save. All right. So again, the way you do it, there's lots of different ways to use this financial calculator. You could use it to calculate mortgage payments, those types of things. But this is calculating future value. Okay. So let's say you have a client that wants to save $500 a month. You put $500 payment. That's the payment button. See these little buttons right here, payment, PMT. And let's say I want to do for 30 years, term, 30, and then term, push the term button, 10% interest, whatever your interest is. And then the future value, it says FV right there above the loan amount. And you put shift that. And if you saved $500 a month for 30 years at 10%, you have 1.13 million. Got it? So that's how to figure out how much money you'll have. Now, back engineering that, she needed 1.9 million. If you guys are, 1.9 million. So back engineering that, we're now saying that's the future value that she wants. So shift FV, right? And then we're saying, and she's going to have at 10% interest for, was it 24-year term? And then what's the payment? $1,597. Got it? So you're solving for how much do I need to pay a month? Or if I pay this a month with this much interest with this long of a time, what will it be? Okay.
Cool.
So, all right. Any other questions I missed, Christina, you can let me know. Okay. All right, so let's go back to that. Now we were talking about inflation. We were talking about FIN number a little bit. These are just, again, concepts that you should know how to have this conversation with your clients. Now let's just talk about retirement planning and retirement accounts, okay? And explaining this to the client. Christina, are you in charge of like highlighting Jamie? You can take her down now.
Okay, I'll take her down. As far
Thank
as
you.
yeah, there are a ton of questions. You want me to wait till the end though?
Is there anything that I didn't answer or that's important you think in here that we should go over?
No, some of them you've already covered. So just keep going and I'll keep
If there's anything that you think, oh, hey, Jamie, before you move on, then just, I'm okay with being interrupted.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, and then we'll move on to the retirement. So now, I'm going to talk to my client about long-term savings. Okay, so long-term savings, there's tax now, tax later, tax never. And if I'm having a conversation now on a second appointment to close, this is not the first time they've heard this. In the first appointment on our step 4, the flip chart, right? The financial education flip chart, it has, look at this. Jasmine put mama and baby next to each other and so that you guys could see.
That mama's huge. That wheel is like almost the size of a.
That wheel right there is so huge. This calculator is gigantic. This must be like
We
a,
had that big one.
it must be like a
It is,
8.5
it's like a
by
size-
11 calculator. Jasmine, but yeah, there you go. They're the same calculator, but yeah. Okay, so tax now, tax later, tax never. On our first appointment, but before we collect an F&A, they're hearing this. We're also, when we're explaining product to them and closing, they're hearing it again. So, but it's definitely the biggest concept we're teaching when we're talking about outpacing inflation and reducing taxes. Okay, so when we say tax now, tax later, tax never, let me just pull this up because this is my step 5. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. Here we go. Okay. So there's tax now, tax later, tax never. And if I'm on the first appointment, I'll usually say something like, which one sounds best so far? And they always say tax never, right? But let's say now I'm explaining the different products. And again, I want you to be able to do this with your clients. So tax now is things like, savings accounts, checking accounts, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, any type of we'll call it naked account. It's just money that doesn't have any type of tax labels on it. Okay. The nice thing about those types of accounts is it's typically very liquid. Okay. So remember what we talked about? Liquid is good for what? Your emergency funds. It's good for accounts that you have to put money in and take it back out. So typically though, with the tax now, right, you're going to have taxes all along the way. Okay. Actually, let me show you on this one because most of you guys are more familiar with this page. I'm going to show you, I think most of you have seen the step 4, this page. Yes, this one. Okay. So now if I'm saying tax now, tax later, tax never, right? So your taxable accounts are things again like stocks or bonds or mutual funds or checking and savings. These are just savings accounts that don't have any tax advantages. They're just like, I would call it naked account, right? Again, good for liquidity, good for that's, you can take it in and out anytime you want. But here's the problem with it. It's taxed all along the way. So you never have the compound interest that we talked about earlier, right? So here's the thing with this. If there's growth, which that's the point of any savings account, you want growth. If there's growth, what happens is it's called capital gains tax. So each year the government comes in and it takes out its capital gains. So it's getting taxed all along the way. So in the end, you have way, way less money. Okay. So not the best for your long-term accounts, better for your short-term accounts. Okay. With long-term accounts, I would pick one of these two, tax now or tax later or tax never or tax deferred or tax exempt. Okay. So tax deferred accounts, now listen to how I explain this, you guys. The tax deferred accounts, you're not getting taxed along the way. It's being deferred till a later date. Now, if Jamie was my client, I'd say, do you know when that's deferred till? She may say, till I'm older, till I'm retired. And some people might know, until I'm 59 and a half. Yes. Okay. So here's how this works. It's deferred until you take the money out. These are called qualified plans. Tax qualified. Okay. So you might have heard of some of these things like IRAs or 401ks. Okay. So a IRA stands for individual retirement account. A 401k is something like that, but for a corporation instead of a individual. There's also things called like 403bs, similar to the 401k, but instead of for a corporation, this would be maybe for a nonprofit, or a lot of teachers have a 403b. Does that make sense? There's other things for like SEP IRAs, simple IRAs. You know, these are all qualified though. They all have that same label on them, meaning tax deferred, meaning you won't pay your taxes along the way, but you'll pay them in the end. Now, I'm going to take this, I'm going to clear these drawings for just a second. Okay, let me explain something to you guys. This is how I explain it to my client. You're deferring it to an unknown tax bracket. Jamie, do you have any idea what your tax bracket's going to be at 60 years old? No, none of us do. We don't know who's going to be in office. We don't know if they're going to raise taxes or lower taxes. With all of the government spending over these last however many years, the experts all feel like they have to go up at some point. Okay. So we're deferring it to this unknown tax bracket, which can be scary because we're going to be old. We're going to hopefully be retired. When we need the money the most and we're living on a fixed monthly income, we don't know how much money we're going to get. Okay. Very scary. The other thing is, remember, they didn't tax us along the way, but they're taxing us in the end. Okay. So let me ask you a scenario here. Let's say you were a farmer. Think about the farmer. I don't know if you do any gardening or anything, but let's say you were a farmer and you go down to the feed store and you buy your little bag of seeds. Okay. You buy your seeds and you go plant your crop. And then it's time to harvest. Okay. Would you rather pay taxes on that little amount of seed, or would you rather wait till the end and pay all that money on your entire crop? They say, of course, I'd rather pay the smaller amount. Right. Well, that's not how this works. How this works is they get taxed on a qualified plan, you guys. Every single penny coming out of a qualified plan is taxed. Every penny coming out of the 401k is taxed. And I can't tell you guys how many times I've sat down with older single women and they're like, I think I'm going to have this much money. And they have no idea that it's even taxed. They think that all that money in their 401k, they get to keep. And it's so wrong, right? So we want to make sure that they understand that every single penny out of these things gets taxed. Now, there's also rules on these things. So rules like 59 and a half. That's a very common rule. Most people know that if you take money out prior to 59 and a half out of a qualified plan, you have a 10% penalty. Okay. What that means is whatever you take out, they're going to have to pay all your regular income tax, whatever your tax bracket is, plus a 10% penalty. Okay. And then what a lot of people don't know is that there's a 70 and a half rule. And if you don't start taking minimum withdrawals by a certain age, then you actually have a whole nother penalty. And I've seen that too with widows that are still working and they're now older and they're trying to save still in their 401k, but now they have to have forced withdrawals and penalties. Yeah, 73. So anyways, so we got Yeah, 73. So now these are rules that most people are unaware of. A lot of people know what the 10% penalty on the 59.5, but I'll just tell you, it's so crazy to me that people don't know that they have to pay taxes in a 401k when they take it out. Okay. So these are just simple ways to explain this stuff. Then I'll say, okay, so now the last place you can put your money is tax exempt or tax advantage, or in essence, tax free. Okay. And there's not a lot of places that are truly tax free. There is typically things like Roth IRAs. And Roth IRA is not a qualified plan. Okay. Even though it has the word IRA in there. Roth IRAs, or things like IULs and VULs. There's also muni bonds. Not a favorite, not really my favorite. Muni bonds are not really my favorite because typically they don't have enough high return for that long-term compounding. But these are wonderful. Okay. And I can show you how both of those work. Okay. But how this works is you pay your taxes up front. You pay the tax on the seed. So meaning when you got paid your paycheck, you already paid your income tax that year or that paycheck. And then you're investing after tax dollars that now grow tax deferred, like these ones. No capital gains is coming out along the way. All that compound interest is happening. But then when you take the money out, you don't have to pay. You get to keep all of it. Does that make sense? So I can show you how those work. But, and I always ask this, but, I mean, as far as so far, which one do you think is best for long-term? Because we're talking about long-term money here. And then they say, well, this one, of course. Now, again, if your tax deferred account, if your 401k is giving you a dollar for dollar match or, great match, and that's free money, take the free money. That's wonderful. But if let's say they're matching you 3% and you're putting in 9%, you're putting your money that's locked up till 59.5 with no financial advisor that's literally riding the roller coaster of the stock market with no help. And we don't even know how that's diversified because you probably don't know, right? So maybe above and beyond that 3%, it might be better to allocate more towards the tax advantage stuff, okay? Now I just will tell you something, you guys. There is another time where qualified money could be better, okay? So, of course, if there's a match, that's great. That's free money. But here's the thing. If they put money into this qualified plan, they get a write-off. Okay. Now, the write-off benefits typically aren't as good for the long-term money as free taxes on the end, right, on the back end. But if they put it in, and let's say they're a higher earner, and they put it in to the tax deferred account, and it lowers their entire income's overall tax bracket, that could be interesting as well. So that's not something that you'll do. That's something, of course, that their accountant would have to give them advice on. Okay. So that's just another thing. So Christina, I'm going to pause for a second and you can tell me any questions that you think I should be answering right now.
Okay, I think I kept posting in there. It looks like somebody asked, why wouldn't, you answered it though. Why wouldn't someone put all their money in tax exempt? Obviously it's the match and the tax deduction.
It could give you a tax deduction. Like, let's say I'm at a really high tax bracket, but if I put a certain amount into my SEP or something, and it lowers my overall tax bracket on an entire income for the year, that could be something that would be very intriguing to someone. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. And then obviously I just said don't give tax advice. And you said
yes,
that.
you can't give tax advice.
Don't give tax advice. Yeah. People ask you what they should do. Okay. So Pamela said, is it a good idea to put all of your money into one basket?
No, of course not. Yeah. Diversification. Yes, diversification. Now, the nice thing about like IULs and indexed universal or index annuities, they have floors. They have guarantees, right? So there's not a lot of risk, of losing money there. Okay. But you still want to be diversified. And I'll address those things too, as I'm teaching. I'm just right now teaching you major concepts that you want to have in your tool belt. And as we go through, we're going to do ATM together between now and 12th Bowl. And I'm going to teach you exactly how you apply this stuff. Okay. So no, you don't want to put everything in one basket. But let's say it's a new husband and wife. Like I wrote up a lot of sales of like young husband and wives with kids this week or between the last 2 weeks. And they don't have a lot of other things. And they're like, well, we want to buy some rental properties and we want to do this and we want to do that. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get your foundational stuff in place. Let's get your emergency fund in place. Let's get the debt paid off. Let's get your insurance and your IUL in place. Let's get you building the habits of a saver so that you could become an investor. Okay. And then once the emergency fund is funded, the debt is paid off, then you have more discretionary income. We could either overfund this IUL or we can start to diversify this portfolio. Okay. And eventually I want my clients to have all of the above almost. Okay. I want them to have all that. I have all those things. I have all those buckets, right? I have tax deferred stuff. I have tax free stuff. I have taxable stuff. I have a big old gigantic fat emergency fund. Sean, what's our emergency fund do? 10% you said?
10 to 12.
10 to 12% is my emergency fund. Okay. And that has
No, 10 to 20.
10 to 20.
Yeah. But right now it's between 10 and 12.
Right now it's between 10 and 12. But how much is in that emergency fund?
$500,000.
$500,000. Okay. So I have a lot in taxable, right? But again,
I'm about to put like 300 grand.
so, but again, I use, well, here's just it's a side note, not to clients, but this is to you guys. You should have fat emergency funds because why? You got to pay your taxes because you're independent. You're an independent. Sean just said we got a $700,000 tax bill. Okay, so we need to have a lot of liquid money to pay that bill too. So that's just a side note to you guys.
Cash Christmas.
We have a different type of cash Christmas, Sean said. So anyways, so I just wanted you guys to hear those types of things, like these concepts. Yeah, Christina said, I want a $700,000 tax bill. It was funny one time, Sean was complaining about writing a $500,000 check to the IRS, but he was complaining to Rich Thawley, right?
That month was $1 million. It was two.
Sean said it was $1 million because it was a bunch of different things, state, federal, whatever, all at the same time. It was $1 million tax bill. He was complaining to Rich about that. And Rich said, I'll trade you. He said, I'll trade you. Sean's like, yeah, I guess perspective, right? So anyways, so long-term savings, we want to make sure, again, that they're getting high returns and minimizing taxes. Okay. All right. Any other questions, Christina, on that stuff?
I didn't see any other questions. There was somebody that said it was a tax question, like when is it beneficial? That's not an answer you want to, there's brackets, right? So for most people, they just need to know there's such a huge
Right. I don't know what their
disparity.
write-offs
I wouldn't
are.
even touch it.
In
I
that
would make one
FNA
comment
in that
though.
FNA, I have no idea what those write-offs are. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I can take a
Yeah.
guess, but
Exactly.
even if I took a guess, it's not my position to help them understand that. Like that's their accountant's job. Okay.
Right.
So unless you're an accountant, you know what I mean? don't go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say that's okay. So let's see, where in the world are you getting those high rates of return on liquid monies? They're obviously not doing the fixed accounts. They're doing equity stocks, I'm assuming. Yeah.
It is. It's a very, very, very conservative.
You need to be an accredited investor, and it's
Yeah.
actually not stocks. It's can't lose money, and we'll get 10 to 20% annually.
It's remember, the actively managed stuff,
Yeah.
Series 65 stuff.
Mhm.
It's in that.
You need a lot more.
It's
yeah.
in that world.
Million
Okay.
plus. Yeah.
Teach us your
Okay,
ways.
Let's see here.
So-
Teach us your
so-
way.
Become an accredited investor.
Hurry up and make money with us so that you can, right? Because once you become an accredited investor, other things open up. But here's the thing. So a lot of times I'll have a client, for example, I have a client, where's Matt's FNA? Matt's a 39-year-old single guy that was referred to me by one of my clients. I wrote him up last week. He had got a small inheritance. It wasn't that much. His grace on, I can't remember how much it was, but he got a small inheritance when his grandpa died. He had, I think it was like 150,000 in a qualified plan. It was a 401k. And I think about another 50,000 in a Roth that got passed to him from his grandparents. Then he had like 64,000 from cash that was given to him. It was all sitting in the checking account. So single man, expenses are low. And he's kind of cute and he's really cool. So I told him I would put a good word out there for him. So he lives in Connecticut though, so I don't know. But anyways, yeah, might be a deal breaker for some people. But anyways, so Matt, he had 64,000 in his account, in his checking account, way too much for an emergency fund, earning 0% in a checking account. Okay. So did I roll over the Roth into a Roth? Yes. I rolled over to the IRA into an IRA, and I'll tell you how I did that. But I did that. But then he has a lot of discretionary income and he was interested in saving more money. Okay. We did, I believe, an $800 a month IUL for the new money. Okay. For the new money that came in, long-term money. Okay. Then he already had no debt and he had this big $64,000 emergency fund. So I moved 6 months because he obviously likes to have conservative money. I moved 6 months into the Betterment, TransAlpha, whatever you want to call it, account for his emergency fund. And then the rest I did into an active of that 64,000, I did into an actively managed account, which was in the market, which was, is securities. It is taxable, but still liquid, earning a much higher rate. So above and beyond the 64,000, I just put 6 months into the emergency fund, but then the rest, he could take a little bit. It's still conservative, but it could lose. And I moved that into actively managed. So I did a Roth, I did an IRA, I did, the two rollovers. I did an IUL, I did an emergency fund, and I did an active managed account. This was 5 accounts on this 39-year-old single man. Okay. But do you see how I did all of them? I did all of them. I did all taxable, tax-deferred, tax exempt.
Okay, Jamie, so we have some more questions. All right. So it says there's a lot of stuff. Do you set up the Betterment for them?
Well,
Because
I have my 65, but I typically
set it.
don't. I'll have Sean
Yeah.
do it. I'll have Sean do the 65 stuff. But yeah, if you're
No, I defer it to Jack now.
Oh, okay. So Sean just said that he has Jack do the Betterment accounts for us. So
Yeah.
somewhere in your upline, there's someone that's doing that.
Somebody has.
You see what I'm saying?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll just
Okay.
give you one thing. With the actively managed stuff, if you're not Series 65, we talked about this a little bit on the emergency fund when we were doing that step last Thursday. How active management works, it's not like an IUL where you get advanced commissions or a rollover where you get a big earned commission. It's called a trail commission on those type of accounts. So let's say money moves into this actively managed fund. It's a trail. It's a tiny little trail that you get paid either annually or quarterly or something like that. So why I'm telling you this is because if one of your clients needs that, first of all, the little emergency funds you probably don't make much money on, but let's say it's a bigger account and you have, let's say Rusty Hood is your CEO. Let's say Rusty does it, or let's say Sean does it for you, or let's say Jack does it, or whoever. They do that account for you, for your client. A lot of the guys will just give the client back to you once you get your 65 license. I know Sean will do that. So when Rusty had a bunch of these clients, when he was in our base shop, Sean would write that account and the trail started going to Sean. And then as soon as Sean passed that test, he just transferred the client to Rusty, and then Rusty started receiving the trail. The reason I'm telling you this is because you're not losing any commissions. Does that make sense? There's no upfront commission like some of these other products that you're more familiar with. So when you have a client that needs this type of stuff, bring one of these other registered investment advisors in to write that if you have to.
Okay, so there's so a couple things to address. I'm just going to scroll up. I know the question, it was like, here it is. If your client has debt and no emergency, do you address those first before addressing retirement?
You know what? I'm so glad you asked that because that was part of what I was going to train on. Okay, so if they have debt and no emergency fund, that's an immediate short-term need. Okay. Should we not do any long-term? No. Should we not do any insurance? No, that's not the answer. They still need insurance, especially if they have debt and kids, right? And someone else that depends on their income. So we need to be creative here and hopefully try to increase the cash flow, like we talked about, but to create a discretionary income and take some of that towards short-term goals and some of that towards long-term goals. I know that they need to start building habits of becoming a saver and paying themselves first, or they will never do it. So if they have a very tight budget and they have some debt and they have some emergency fund, I won't say, because sometimes clients will tell you this, well, I'm going to wait till I pay off my debt on this Ramsey thing before I start saving or before I got my insurance. But what if they die? The wife's it's like the poor getting poorer. Okay. So maybe we set up just a little term policy for now, or a smaller IUL for now. I just did that for that FNA that I showed you. Single mom, really tight budget right now. And she had a whole life policy that she'd been paying for years and had zero cash value. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to replace it with an IUL, a better policy. Okay. You're going to pay the target for now, which I normally don't sell at Target, but you're going to pay the target for now. The rest of the money, we're going to pay off the debt. We're going to do the emergency fund. When those are paid off, you're going to increase it. But she has a policy. You know what I'm saying? So I want her to start saving. Do it concurrently. Now, again, we have to have a solid plan to get out of debt, and they have to know exactly how much they need to save and where to save for that emergency fund. Okay, when you guys start to see me do the actual field training presentations, you'll see all of this come together of how I make these recommendations. But I do want to go over the estate planning stuff before we run out of time. Okay, so the last step is estate planning. Okay, now just like the accountant thing, like you cannot give tax advice because you're not an accountant. Well, you can't give legal advice either if you're not an attorney. So estate planning, you have to be an estate planning attorney to do that. So, you know, I know that over the years, you know, teams have had, you know, different lawyer groups, you know, I think in WFG, there was some that were approved at some times, and it's like a less expensive way to get someone a trust and a will and those things. I would say do not do any of those unless they are approved by WFG. So sometimes people say, well, if I'm not securities licensed, WFG says it doesn't matter. But they won't let the securities guys do it. If they're not letting the securities guys do it, that means that they did the due diligence. I wouldn't do it either if I was life licensed. But doesn't that make sense to you? Like, people that understand the stuff a lot better already did the due diligence, and they told the securities guys, no, that you can't do this, whatever, right? So I'll just tell you, in 25 years, what I've always done is this. I tried to find people that I trust, that I would do business with. And if I feel comfortable doing business with them, then I would probably feel comfortable letting my clients do business with them. Because here's the rule, okay? You can refer people. You can refer people to accountants, to CPAs, to estate planning attorneys, but you cannot do any type of quid pro quo. You cannot get paid. You cannot get paid to refer someone to an attorney or to an accountant. If you do, you are definitely in a securities violation. Okay. So, but like, for example, in California, in back kind of where I used to live, like in Ventura County, there was a guy that is an amazing estate planning attorney. He's just a very honest man. I know his family. I know him. I would trust him to do my stuff. Right. So I would feel comfortable referring him. Okay. Now remember, if anything goes wrong, your clients are going to be mad at you. Okay. So be very careful referring business to people like this. Okay. So typically I will say something like this. Our job is not to do the estate plan. Our job is to identify if there's a need for an estate plan. When do they need an estate plan? If they have a home, if they have a bunch of assets, if they have kids, if they want their whatever they want their wishes to be handled upon their death, if they can't make a decision because they're on life support, so who decides if the plug is pulled, right? Those are types of things that a living trust and a will do. Okay, so here's what an estate plan. It's a legal document with at least a living trust and a will included. Okay. So when you are referring to an estate planning attorney and you're trying to say, how much will you charge the client? And they say, oh, I'll charge $3,000. What's included? And it better have a full estate plan, a living trust, and a will. Okay. So, you know, these things cost money, 5,000 more sometimes. If they're saying 20,000, that's ridiculous. That's not right. I would say 3,000 is a really good price, a really good price. And so a lot of times people think this is a luxury. Can people do it online themselves? They can. Can they go to these types of companies that we're talking about? They can. But I prefer this being done by someone that's really good at it, like a real estate planning attorney. A couple tips I would tell you is, you know, like I hear this a lot lately. They say, oh, I'm going to use so-and-so's estate guy out in California, some uplines estate guy or something. I'm like, why would you do that? You don't live in California. If I live in Tennessee and I'm doing my will and trust, I probably should find a really good person here, licensed attorney here. Now, maybe everybody doesn't agree with me on that, but I have had several very respected estate planning attorneys tell me that this is the best way to go. Because if I were to die, there's different laws in different states, and you want an expert at that time on your stuff in the state that you live in. Okay. And same thing is if you lived in California and you moved to Tennessee, it's probably a good time to update that trust and will and just get any other things that, you know, out of the way that maybe you don't know about that are different in this state that you live in. So if I'm talking to my client and I say, they're like, hey, we were thinking about getting a living trust. I actually had one of the clients I did last week, husband and wife, they have a little daughter. And they're like, we want to get a living trust. And this guy told us it was 10,000. And I said, well, do you know this guy? How did you meet this guy? He said, well, I think I just went online or something. I said, here's what I would do. This is what my advice is. I would go and ask around at church, at different places, and find a bunch of referrals of people that, you know, with credibility that are referrals. Then of those guys, meet with them, meet with those guys, do your little due diligence on those guys, look up the reviews on those guys, meet with them, see which ones you vibe with, and then decide on who you want to go with, obviously based on price and based on your comfort level with that person. Okay. So an estate planning attorney, there's a lot of reasons. Again, durable power of attorney should be in there too. Again, that's who makes the decisions on those like life support things. That a good estate planning attorney is really important. Now, could you develop a relationship where you're like, let's say there's a guy at church that's really amazing, very good reviews, estate planning attorney. You meet with them, you do a step one with him, show him who we are, what we do. You guys have a conversation about, you know, I'd love to refer clients to you, but I want to show you what I'm doing. Maybe you could send me the life insurance business and I could send you the estate planning business. That is totally fine as long as you're not getting any compensation for it. Someone's saying Inherit Guard. I have never heard of them. I don't think that they're
Jerry Kane, and he said he is affiliated.
no, they're not approved.
Are you sure? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
approved. There's not an estate planning thing right now that it's approved that I know.
So Legacy Shield, it says Legacy. So a bunch of people are asking about the
I don't think that there's
connections.
any approved right now.
Okay,
And even if there was, I don't really like to use that because again, I want them to sit down with someone, just like with me, just like with their accountant. I don't want, I mean, of course, if I have very low income, like my daughter Daisy, if let's say she worked at Chick-fil-A, yeah, she could do 1-800 taxes or something, you know what I mean, for her taxes. But this is important. This, you know what I mean? So
the only other thing I would say too is that you guys want to keep the base of what we do. You don't want other things to compromise.
Right.
You know, like
right.
I've seen
because
that
like
happen
if let's
where
say it was
people are-
Legacy Shield and it didn't go well for your client,
then
you
they
see what I'm
just
saying?
don't do anything with you. Right. So that's
Yes.
why it's like, I've seen that where people get so excited about the will trust thing and then they forget the other part. which that's what we do. And the base of the house, the first thing that an estate planner asks anyway is how much insurance do you have? So like that needs to be the the foundation. Okay, and the last thing here, it says, if somebody said, is Trans Alpha the same as Betterment? Yes. Is it advisable to put their emergency fund into an IUL since it's liquid and guaranteed?
No,
No.
no.
Right.
Remember, that's what I said in the beginning, that the IULs and stuff need to be long-term thinking. It is like, I remember one time someone explained there's the put and take account and the put and leave account. Okay. So the put and take is like your checking, your emergency fund, liquid. Okay. Now, even though the IUL can be accessed prior to 59 and a half, if people are taking money out of it right and left, it may not be able to ever accumulate for what its actual purpose is. Now, if you have a more savvy investor that's, doing the 7-pay and are front loading this IUL, and they're using it for this type of investment purpose, then yes, like we do those types of things all the time too. But in the more majority, it's not used for that. It's they're putting away a couple $100 a month, $500 a month, $800 a month, $300 a month for long term. And if you are accessing it too soon, I just had a roll-up client call last night that had some massive flooding at his house. There's an emergency, massive, more than like the normal emergency. I think he needed like $70,000, probably a Florida thing. I don't know. But he's like, can I take the money from my IUL? And so Grace is helping him set up to take $50,000 out of his IUL today. So you can, but that's not, it should never be an emergency fund. That's not, if you're selling it like that, I would say you're probably in a compliance violation. Okay. All right. I want to go over one more concept, and you can go ahead and watch the chat. I know we're a few minutes over here. Gosh, I wish we had more time. So, but at least we got through this stuff. Now, next week we can get into like actually doing it, okay, and selling. But I had a field trainer ask me something yesterday. And I think this might be something that we can talk about as far as mindset of a field trainer. She said, what do I do? Basically, I'm going to paraphrase here, but what do I do if my team keeps wanting me to do appointments with broke people? Right? She's like, I have to eat, right? They all, like these guys are all part-time and have other sources of income, but I'm full-time and I have a good market and I should be seeing my clients, right? But they're taking me to not so great of market, and my earning potential could be, right, whatever. What do I do? Like, what's a nice way to tell my people that? I don't want to discourage them from booking appointments, but I don't know if it's good for me to be doing all these, bad ones. Okay. So there's a lot of mindset around that as far as field trainer. And first of all, if your client or if your agents keep booking bad market, number one, you control the direction of your market. I had a bad market. John Shin took me into a better market. Okay. I was young and 22 years old, and no one I knew was married or had any money. So he could have just said, keep booking appointments, and then getting frustrated that they were broke. But he didn't do that because he's a builder. Okay. So there's two types of field trainers here in the mindset. Is the mindset a producer mindset? I need to make money off my people. Or is it a builder mindset? I'm doing these appointments to build my people and to build my company. So if you keep letting your people book their own appointments in bad markets, whose fault is it? Okay. I'll tell you again, you control the direction of your market. So there's a few things I would do here, but the first thing, I would sit down with that person and I would do the marketing expansion plan. And I would say, who are the best people at church that are 8-pointers? Who are the best people from high school? Who are the best people from old bosses or old jobs? Who are the best people from your neighborhood that are 8-pointers? So I would help that person to create a better list. Okay. And then I would probably help them call it, so that now the appointments that I'm doing for them are 8-pointers. And then I recruit someone for them. And then that 8-pointer now has their list in a much better market. And now I'm field training in good markets. So I control the direction of it. That's number one. Okay. Number two. Okay. So here's how I answered it. Okay. I said, you know, can they do some of these appointments, or can they match up with their people? Right. Because if you're frustrated because you keep doing that, like keep doing that person's appointments or that bad market in that leg, it's probably because you're not going wide enough and have other people to train. When you only have 1 or 2 guys, that's all you got. So don't complain about it, right? You can't complain about a bad market if you're not going wide and getting other people to train. So if you had 10 other people to train, you would probably be taking those and matching up this one with other trainers. So I asked about the matchup, and here's what they said. But I only have 1 person to match up with. Right? So should I match it up with people outside? Well, that's not nice to do. That's not nice to give your crappy appointments to other leaders, right? I wouldn't do that. They're going to get a bad reputation if you did that, right? So I said I would shift the mindset. This is the most important part. I would shift the mindset to these appointments I'm doing. Good market, bad market, doesn't matter. But these appointments that I'm doing are to build trainers, builder's mindset, versus these appointments I'm doing are to make money. Now, the reason that they probably don't have anybody to match up with is why? Because they're not building trainers. They're not building trainers. Okay. So if I don't have anybody to match up with, even though I've done all these appointments, good or bad market, it doesn't matter, because they already said they have a good market, but they're not building trainers. So the mindset of the field trainer, first of all, I control the market. I want to be in a good market. If it keeps happening, change it, train on it, teach your people how to get into better markets, teach them to stop talking to the, broke single, instead talk to the 25 to 45 married with kids, right? I was the same way. I was young and single and broke, and I had to get into better markets so I can be more profitable. But I'm not going to complain about my guys doing it. I'm their leader. I have to help them. But the mindset is this. When I'm on an appointment, listen, this is the most important. When I'm on an appointment, the most important person there is not the prospect. What we do is good, and people need it. So if they need it, I'm going to put a plan in place. I'm going to make money. The most important is not the prospect. It's my trainee. It's my trainee that's watching me. So when I'm sitting down with the broke guy for my girl, okay, instead of getting mad or frustrated that I'm wasting my time, it's not a waste of time. It's not. Even if they don't even become a client, because my trainee is learning. My trainee's learning. And so I need to do it right. And I need to be excited. And I need to set an example. And if possible, I need to do everything that the client needs that's suitable for him. Okay. And then I need to help him get referrals in good markets and ask good questions for my trainee to get good referrals. Okay. But if I'm just there to close a sale in my trainee's market, I have a producer mindset that's not building any trainers properly and pissed off that I'm not making any money. Okay.
You're right.
So I remember I won't say the name, okay, because he's an amazing leader, but I remember when this one person was in my base shop and he took an F&A and he came back and he said, yeah, I'm not even going to go back on the next appointment because they're broke and they can't do anything. And I lit his butt up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Look, like he's broke. Yeah, that's going to happen. Fix the market. Teach your people the right way. Get into better markets. That's your responsibility. I go, but you don't leave this client hanging. We are no family left behind. So you go back in there and you teach them how much they need to have in an emergency fund, how much they need to have for insurance, and you do a good job so that your trainee sees the right way to do this business. Otherwise, you're just training your trainee to be a jerk to clients and that they don't matter. And this poor guy's like, okay, no one cares about me. They're just like Charles Schwab, or they're just like everybody else. So I go, you go back in there, and it might be a lost lead. You might go in and you put a little emergency plan in place for $25 a month. Your fault, you're in the wrong market. That's your job to get out of it. Okay. But here's the deal. That $25 emergency fund that you didn't get paid on, you did the right job, and you know you did, and your trainee feels great about what we do, and their family wasn't snubbed because you're a snotty whatever. Okay. Now, that person may refer you to the rich uncle in the family because you did the right job. So do you see what I'm saying? So there's a code of honor in Team Revolution. And one of those code of honors says, treat every client like gold. Treat them the same, whether it's the $25 emergency fund that you're getting paid zero on, or the big old rollover that you're making $50,000 on. Okay. Treat them the same. You do the right job. And remember that the trainee is watching. The trainee is learning how to build a company from you. Yes, they're learning how to make money. Yes, they're learning how to close a sale. Yes, they're learning about products, but they're learning how to build a company, how to treat people right. Now think long-term as a builder, not just as a client now, but as a builder. What do you want your teammates to look like? What do you want? Let's say you have 4,000 licensed agents like I do. What do you want them to look like? What do you want your reputation in the marketplace to be? And I promise you, if you go in with the intention of, I'm helping this trainee to launch their business, not make a sale, not get a recruit. I'm helping my trainee to launch their business. So I want to help leave a great impression so that this guy will give him referrals at the very least. And that, you know, everybody in their market will be like, yes, I want to give Jamie and Joe all my names. Okay. Anyways, I just thought that was really the mindset of a field trainer is really important too, that we talk about. And then next week, we'll get into actually how to present and close sales. Okay. Christina, is there anything I should address before we?
No, I just think that was the best part, was that last part. That was so good. I think we can have a class just on that last piece, but there's questions, but they're pretty much like the same, but really good today.
Okay. Well, good. Well, I'm glad it took 2 classes, but you got all this stuff. Now, if there's something, I would get your calculators. If you don't have a calculator, I would get a paper F and A and start learning how to fill those out. If there's something that was like confusing, like learning to use a calculator, just have you sit down with your field trainer or your S&D and be like, show me one more time, right? Or if maybe you have questions on anything that we talked about, you know, yes, last week or this week, I will do a replay again of this until next Thursday. So those of you guys that have people that were at work and stuff, you can have them watch it. And then we're going to really get into like how to really be an effective field trainer next